If this looks familiar, it's because we've been here before. Follette Park was the subject of the very first Parks and Landmarks. I made that video almost 2 full years ago, and it hasn't aged well in my estimation. I don't see much of a point in redoing most of the old, mediocre episodes. I could replace some of the more lackluster shots, take out the cringy jokes, but I wouldn't have much new to say. Ultimately, it's better to consider those as practice episodes and move on. Follette, though, is different. As the last checkpoint before the Yahara River leaves the Madison Four Lakes, what happens here can be indicative of events upstream. And since I started this series, quite a bit has happened upstream. Call this episode a retread if you want, but with last year's floods in mind, it's worth our time to take a deeper look at the lower Yahara River and a park it defines. Follette County Park consists of a few acres of land just north of Stoughton on the east shore of Lake Kegonsa. Geographically, it's part of a larger area of protected marshy lakeshore around where the Yahara River drains out of Lake Kegonsa. North of the Yahara is Lake Kegonsa State Park, and everything south of the river is Follette County Park. The park takes its name from Wisconsin's 20th governor, Robert M. Follette, Fighting Bob if you're into nicknames. Follette was a Republican progressive in much the same style as Theodore Roosevelt, and he worked around the same time. During his 40-year career in public service, both as governor and in Congress, he worked hard to take down monopolies and trusts, especially in the railroad industry. Follette's work humbled the rail companies. They were made to see that they weren't the ultimate power in a rapidly industrializing nation. Even their influence had a limit, and they couldn't just walk all over the... Oh, yeah, there's a rail line running right through the park. Perhaps it's an ironic way to memorialize one of Wisconsin's greatest public servants, but if you ignore the historical context, having the tracks here isn't so bad. Though this rocky embankment shortens the beach, it also blocks out the sounds and sights of the rest of the park. Combine that with the fact that Kegonsa is already the most peaceful of the Yahara's 4 lakes, and you've got the recipe for the perfect quiet sandy getaway spot. Of course, the amount of available space depends entirely on the water level. Years ago, when I first visited this park, there was about 5 feet of sand, enough to sit down and stay dry. In recent years, what little beach there was has disappeared completely. At the end of summer 2018, the greater Madison community was made well aware of the impacts of floods. Homes were swamped, roads were closed, a lovely park in Middleton just straight up washed away. But except for that last thing, Madison has mostly moved on. While folks on the Isthmus try to figure out how to prevent floods in the future, the lower Yahara patiently waits for waters that have been high for years to return to their normal level. You would think water level control on Lake Kegonsa would be easy. Since it's the last lake in the chain, all we should have to do to drain it is keep the dam open and let gravity do its thing. Unfortunately, it's just not that simple. Even when it's wide open, the dam and the adjacent train bridge constrict the flow of water more than the river's natural state. Still, that would be fine, but then you add in weeds, and the backup becomes unmanageable. It turns out the chemicals we use to grow plants on land also boost the growth of those in water. If you've ever been on a boat around here, you've certainly encountered these nautical nuisances. Not only do underwater plants clog propellers, they also make it impossible for water to flow quickly through the river. This problem is at its worst in the summer. During the height of the growing season, chemicals that run off from farms send weeds into overdrive. The county mans about half a dozen boats purpose-built to cut a path, but sometimes even that isn't enough. You see, while water fails to drain from the Yahara system, it's also flowing in faster than ever before. You can once again thank human development for this. It's probably a little hyperbolic to quote King of the Hill, but what Peggy says about Phoenix is true in a different way of Madison.
This city should not exist. It is a monument to man's arrogance.
For some reason, when our forefathers built up Dane County, they forgot that only ogres can turn a swamp into a permanent home. Huge sections of land around Madison are still wetland, but if you've ever had a basement or a soccer field flood, you know that a lot more has been paved over. The thing is, we need those wetlands. They act as nature's sponge, trapping and absorbing rainwater where it falls. When they're sealed over to create, say, a Menards parking lot, All the water that falls there then has to go somewhere else. None of it gets absorbed. Instead, it goes down the drain, maybe into a creek, then directly into a lake or river. When you multiply this effect by everyone that is built on the Yahara watershed, it inundates a small river with the runoff of 500,000 people. All this goes to show the far-reaching consequences our collective actions can have. Though most Dane County residents will never even know La Follette Park exists, where they build and how they treat their crops will have a pretty direct impact on whether La Follette will ever have a beach again. There is hope in regard to that. Last year's catastrophic floods have spurred renewed interest in water management. Over the next few years, the river will likely be dredged, and some of the dams might even come down. That wouldn't be unprecedented. In 2011, the DNR removed an aging dam at Stebbinsville Road. The river hasn't suffered in its absence. Today, you can hardly tell it was ever there. While we wait for a future without floods, La Follette County Park is still a fine place to spend an afternoon. You can relax either on land or in the water, but combining the two on a beach will have to wait. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to Clarion Broadcasting so you never miss an episode. If you want to dig deeper, you can find links I used for research and clips I borrowed in the description below. Also in the description, check out our free radio website and the interactive map where I post the location of every Parks and Landmarks episode. For Clarion Broadcasting, I'm Sean Bull. I'll see you soon on another Parks and Landmarks.